A major development could soon change the way the Philippines conducts patrols in the West Philippine Sea. And the biggest question is this: what happens when the Philippine Coast Guard is no longer alone when facing Chinese vessels at sea? A senior United States official has confirmed that 4 United States Coast Guard cutters will be deployed to the Philippines on a rotational basis to help conduct patrols in the region. And this could significantly change the situation, because when United States Coast Guard cutters regularly operate alongside Philippine vessels in the West Philippine Sea, China may have to reconsider how it responds. But there is one question that stands out. Will China use the same tactics against American Coast Guard cutters that it has used against Philippine vessels? That is what we need to examine. United States Undersecretary of War Elbridge Colby has confirmed that the United States Coast Guard will forward deploy 4 Sentinel-class fast response cutters to the Philippines. These vessels will not necessarily remain in the country at the same time. Instead, they will operate under a rotational deployment system. This means the cutters can rotate through the Philippines, maintaining a regular United States Coast Guard presence in the region. And their mission will include assisting the Philippines with maritime patrols, including operations in the West Philippine Sea. This is significant because there is a major difference between an occasional visit and a regular operational presence. Instead of American Coast Guard vessels appearing only during exercises or port visits, they could become a regular part of maritime security operations alongside the Philippines. Why the U.S. Coast Guard? It is important to understand that this involves the United States Coast Guard, not the United States Navy. And that distinction matters. The Coast Guard focuses heavily on maritime security, law enforcement, search and rescue, and other missions at sea. That makes its presence particularly relevant to situations where the objective is maritime security and patrol operations rather than preparation for a military confrontation. For the Philippines, this could be a major advantage. The challenges in the West Philippine Sea do not always require a military response. Many situations require something much simpler: presence, patrols, monitoring, documentation, and the ability to respond quickly when an incident occurs. This is where the United States Coast Guard could play an important role. There is still a major question about exactly how the United States Coast Guard will operate inside the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. For example, who will lead a joint patrol? What communication procedures will be used? What happens if a Chinese vessel attempts to block the patrol? And what happens if a Chinese vessel conducts a dangerous maneuver? These details matter because they will determine how effective this new arrangement will actually be. Having an American cutter in the area is one thing. Knowing exactly how it will respond during an actual maritime incident is another. China is unlikely to welcome this development. Beijing has repeatedly opposed what it considers increased United States involvement in the South China Sea. So regular patrols involving the United States Coast Guard and the Philippines could be viewed by China as another expansion of American presence in the region. But there is one particular issue that will be worth watching. How will Chinese vessels deal with American Coast Guard cutters? Because the situation could be very different when the vessel on the other side is not from the Philippines, but from the United States. Over the past several years, there have been numerous incidents involving Philippine vessels in the West Philippine Sea. These have included attempts to block routes, dangerous maneuvers, close encounters, and in some cases, the use of water cannons. But now there could be a new situation. What happens if a Sentinel-class cutter is operating alongside a Philippine Coast Guard vessel? Will Chinese vessels continue using the same aggressive tactics? If they do, the consequences could be much greater, because the incident would no longer involve only the Philippines and China. It could immediately become a diplomatic issue involving the United States. And that is where the strategic value of this deployment becomes more important. It is important to make this clear. The presence of United States Coast Guard cutters does not automatically mean that the United States is preparing for a military confrontation with China. Instead, the deployment can be viewed as a form of deterrence. The concept is relatively simple. When more international forces are present, and when more activity at sea is being observed and documented, the diplomatic and strategic cost of aggressive actions can increase. That could discourage reckless behavior. For the Philippines, this is important because the issue is not simply about having more ships. It is also about protecting and enforcing the country's maritime rights under international law. However, The Philippines should not view the United States Coast Guard deployment as a replacement for its own capabilities. The country still needs to strengthen its maritime forces. It needs more modern patrol vessels, better surveillance, improved communications, and stronger capabilities for both the Philippine Coast Guard and the Philippine Navy. American assistance should strengthen Philippine capabilities, not replace them, because ultimately, the Philippines remains responsible for protecting and monitoring its own exclusive economic zone. The word rotational is also important. By rotating different cutters through the Philippines, the United States can maintain a regular Coast Guard presence without permanently stationing the same vessel here. And in maritime security, consistency matters. A presence that is regularly seen is harder to ignore. It also allows the two Coast Guards to develop better coordination and interoperability through repeated operations. So this could become more than simply sending 4 ships to the Philippines. It could become the foundation for a more regular maritime security partnership between the Philippines and the United States. But the real test will not happen during a ceremony. It will not happen during a press conference. It will happen at sea. Imagine a Philippine Coast Guard patrol operating in the West Philippine Sea alongside a United States Coast Guard cutter. Then a Chinese vessel approaches. What happens next? Will the encounter remain calm? Will Chinese vessels avoid confrontation? Or will they continue using the same tactics that Philippine vessels have experienced in previous incidents? The first major encounters under this new arrangement could reveal just how significant this deployment really is. At first glance, for Sentinel-class fast response cutters may not seem like a massive change, but strategically their impact could be much larger. Because the important question is not simply how many ships are involved. It is who is at sea, how regularly they are there, and what happens when a confrontation occurs. If the United States Coast Guard becomes a regular partner of the Philippine Coast Guard in the West Philippine Sea, international attention on the area could become even stronger. And that could influence the calculations of vessels operating there. But one thing is already clear. The Philippines will not be the only one watching. More eyes will be on the West Philippine Sea. And if another serious maritime incident occurs, there will be more vessels capable of observing, documenting, and responding to what happens. So the next thing we should watch is not simply when the 4 cutters arrive. The bigger question is, what will China do when Philippine Coast Guard vessels are operating alongside the United States Coast Guard in the West Philippine Sea? Because the answer to that question could determine just how significant this new development will be for the future of the West Philippine Sea. The arrival of regular United States Coast Guard patrols could mark an important new chapter for the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea. But the real test will happen on the water. Will this increased American presence discourage aggressive actions? Or will China continue using the same tactics against Philippine vessels? Whatever happens next, one thing is clear. The West Philippine Sea is receiving more attention, and the Philippines is no longer standing alone. Now, we want to hear from you. Do you think the presence of the United States Coast Guard will make a real difference? Share your thoughts in the comments. And for more updates and analysis on Philippine defense and security, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow.